Rain streamed down the edge of Nia Washington's coat as she stood at the steps of the church, holding her baby close, the knitted blue blanket already soaked. Her eyes were tired and swollen from grief, but her spine stayed straight as she faced the building where her husband's farewell was being held. Without her, before she could move, a sharp voice sliced through the mist. "If you don't sign this waiver, you're not stepping foot in this church," said Valerie Whitmore, her tone icy and commanding. Nia tightened her grip on her child, her jaw set. "He was my husband. I have every right to be here." From behind Valerie, Anthony Whitmore stepped forward holding a folded document. "You were never his equal. You're just some girl from nowhere. You don't belong to this family." Through the gap in the doors, Nia saw the altar inside, white lilies surrounding a photo of Malcolm, his smile framed in black ribbon. Her chest ached. "I don't want your money," she said. "I just want to say goodbye." Valerie's eyes narrowed. "Then sign the waiver. Deny any claim to his estate, that's all we ask." Nia's voice broke for the first time, not from weakness but sorrow. "You mean deny everything he left for our son? Pretend we didn't exist?" Anthony stepped forward, now with visible anger. "Sign it or leave." No one said anything. Guests standing by the entrance turned their faces away. Not a single person stepped in. Nia looked down at her son, kissed his forehead, and turned toward the church doors one final time. "No." Anthony grabbed her arm and shoved her. "Then get out." She stumbled, catching herself against the railing, shielding her baby as the child cried out. Valerie adjusted her gloves and sneered. "You're making a scene. This is a respectable family." Nia looked around, desperate for anyone to speak up. No one did. The church doors closed behind her with finality. Rain poured down harder. Her coat clung to her body. Her breath caught from the chill. She rocked her son gently, whispering soft Spanish lullabies. She turned away from the place that had erased her. At the end of the street, she found a concrete ledge and sat down, holding her son tightly. Her tears fell freely now, mixing with the rain. She thought of Malcolm, not in a coffin, but laughing in their bed, cracking jokes through the pain, promising her everything would be okay. Cancer had taken him piece by piece, but he never showed fear. The night before he passed, he held her hand and whispered, "If anything happens, he'll come. I asked him. He promised." She hadn't understood then. But now, alone, discarded by the family that once called her one of their own. Those words echoed in her soul. The street was alive with strangers moving past under umbrellas, cars slicing through puddles. But Nia sat still, unnoticed, soaked to the bone. Her baby whimpered quietly against her, his tiny body seeking warmth she could barely give. She rocked gently, humming broken melodies, her eyes heavy with loss. Then a car slowed beside her, sleek and black. It moved like it didn't belong to, the noise around it. The engine went silent, the window rolled down, and the back door opened. A tall man stepped out, holding a large umbrella. His shoes splashed in the puddles as he walked toward her. "Nia?" he asked. She looked up, startled. The face didn't register, but his eyes were steady, warm, not pitying, just seeing her. She didn't move. Her body was frozen, soaked, her arms aching from holding her baby too long, too tightly. The man crouched in front of her, not close, not imposing. He wore a dark gray suit, no tie. Raindrops slid from his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice. "My name is Elijah Brooks," he said. "I was Malcolm's friend." Nia blinked. "I've never heard of you." "I know. We met years ago. I was doing legal aid work in Ghana. There was a landslide in a remote village. I got caught under rubble. Malcolm pulled me out, carried me for miles to a clinic, stayed with me the whole night. I asked him why he didn't leave me behind. He said, 'My wife would never forgive me.'" Elijah looked at her child. "He talked about you every time we spoke. Said you had the fiercest heart and the gentlest soul. Said if anything ever happened to him and I was still breathing, I had to find you." He stood, stepped to the car, reached inside, and returned with a large manila envelope. He crouched again and held it out with both hands. "This isn't A legal contract, he said. It's a promise. He made me write it up the last time I visited him. It says I'm to treat you as family. No agenda, no strings. Just a vow. Nia took the envelope, but didn't open it. Her fingers shook around. The edges. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. You're not supposed to know me, Elijah said. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here because he asked me to be. Nia looked at her baby, whose eyes fluttered open, sensing something unfamiliar but calm. I don't have anywhere to go. Then let's start there, Elijah said. I've arranged a place. It's warm, safe. You don't have to decide anything today, but you shouldn't be alone. He stood and opened the car door. For a few seconds, Nia didn't move. Then she rose slowly, her child tight in her arms. She took one last look back at the church where the doors had closed on her pain, then turned toward the car. Elijah reached out his hand. Nia hesitated, then placed her hand in his. It was warm, steady. And for the first time since Malcolm's death, she didn't feel invisible. She stepped into the car. The door shut behind her, and she exhaled. The apartment smelled like lavender and wood polish. It was too quiet, too untouched. Nia stood by the doorway, her son pressed to her chest, unsure if she should step further or turn back. Elijah gently placed her small suitcase in the hallway, careful not to let it thud against the hardwood. He didn't crowd her. He just gave a soft, even-toned, "Make yourself at home." The phrase hit her like a memory. Home hadn't meant anything stable in a long time. Still, she moved forward. The space was modern, but soft. No cold marble or steel edges. Warm taupe, walls, pale green curtains and soft light from corner lamps instead of harsh ceiling bulbs. No clutter, no excess, but nothing hollow. Elijah led her to a room at the back of the apartment, the door already slightly open. "This is for your son," he said. Nia stepped inside. It wasn't luxurious, but it was prepared. A white crib, a soft gray blanket folded neatly, shelves with board books and plush toys, bottles washed and arranged on the counter, formula, diapers, wipes, a tiny wooden rocking chair with a yellow cushion near the window. She stood frozen. "I had help," Elijah said gently from behind. "My friend has a baby girl." She helped. Pick everything, made sure it was all right, safe, comfortable. Nia swallowed. Her instincts flared. Suspicion and gratitude collided in her chest. Everything was too kind, too ready. She looked around slowly, noticing what wasn't there. No name on the door. No pink or blue decorations. No assumptions. Just a quiet space. "Thank you," she said, though it came out barely above a whisper. Elijah didn't push for more. He nodded, stepping back. "I'll be down the hall if you need anything." Then he left her there. In the following days, Elijah kept his distance, present but never hovering. He worked from a small office tucked near the living room, answered emails in the kitchen, passed through the hallway with a nod and a quiet, "Good morning." Groceries filled the fridge, but he never commented if she ate or didn't. He never asked questions. Never tried to cheer her up. She cooked sometimes, when her mind was clear enough to. Otherwise, she stayed quiet, her hair tied tight, her shoulders drawn. Every time he passed her, a part of her body tensed like it was preparing for something that never came. But the kindness never turned sharp. That scared her more than cruelty, because it stayed. It was a quiet afternoon. No wind, no sirens, no noise from outside. Breakfast had been simple: scrambled eggs, tea, and the soft babble of Nia's baby boy. After settling him for a nap, Nia walked into her room and stopped. Something was sitting on the nightstand, a photo frame. She stepped closer, her breath hitching. It was Malcolm, a candid picture. He was standing in front of a food truck, arms folded, grinning wide with the sun in his hair. His shirt had a smear of mustard. She remembered that day, their third date. He'd tried to speak Spanish and butchered it so badly she laughed until her stomach hurt. Now her eyes burned. Under the frame was a note in clean handwriting. "He's still here." Naya turned, startled. Elijah stood at the edge of the hallway, a soft cloth in his hands. His eyes met hers, not expecting a reaction, not waiting for approval, just present. "I found it in a box Malcolm left with me," he said. "I wasn't sure if... I didn't want to intrude, but I thought maybe it would help." She looked down at the frame again. "You cleaned it." There was dust. "I wanted it to look loved." Her throat tightened. No one had done something like this since Malcolm's death. Everyone else had tried to make her move on, forget faster, heal cleaner. But Elijah, he honored what had been. She placed the photo back on the stand with care. "Thank you." He nodded and turned away. In that still moment, surrounded by soft light and old memories, Naya didn't feel like a guest. She didn't feel like someone broken who needed fixing. She felt seen. And Malcolm, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel gone. The wooden box sat quietly on the shelf in Nia's room. She hadn't noticed it until a few nights after the photo appeared. It was small, the kind of thing anyone might overlook, until they needed it. A handwritten note was taped to the lid in Malcolm's unmistakable handwriting. "When you're ready, M." She stared at it for a long time before lifting the lid. Inside were letters, each one tied with a faded blue ribbon, the paper aged, ink, slightly smudged. Her hands trembled as she lifted the first envelope. It wasn't addressed to her. It was for Elijah. "Elijah, if you're reading this, it means I probably couldn't dodge the inevitable. Cancer's a slow thief, but it's honest. Thank you for being there, Sharon." "No, Nia, she won't trust you. Not right away. She'll be scared, angry, quiet. Don't push her, just make tea. Sit near her. She'll speak when her heart can bear it." Nia wiped a tear, then opened the next letter. This one had her name. "Mida, I'm writing this before my thoughts. Blur. I know how hard it will be without me, and I hate that I can't hold you through it. But I left you in the care of someone who sees you. Not as my wife, but as your own soul. I didn't trust Elijah because he's strong or successful. I trusted him because he understands that silence doesn't mean absence and kindness doesn't need an audience. If you're still afraid, don't be. Let him make the tea. Let him listen. And remember, you were never just my wife. You were my miracle. I love you, Malcolm." Her shoulders crumpled. The letter dropped to her lap as her hands flew to her face. She hadn't cried like this in weeks, openly, uncontrollably. The next morning at dawn, she walked into the kitchen. Her robe hung tightly around her. Elijah was already there, standing at the stove. He didn't look up. He poured hot water over chamomile flowers and set the mug on the table. Then he sat across from her. He didn't speak, didn't ask what happened, didn't offer cliches or comfort that couldn't reach the place inside her that ached. "I read them," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. She looked into the tea's steam, then back at him. "He knew me, even at the end." "He did," Elijah said, "and he trusted you to carry on." They sat in silence, not the kind that needed to be filled, the kind that allowed room for grief to breathe. And then, for the first time since Malcolm passed, Nia began to talk, not about death or custody or what she'd lost, but about life. About dancing barefoot in the rain as a girl in Kingston. About learning English just to understand the lyrics of the songs Malcolm used to send her. About their first kiss, awkward and clumsy, when he knocked over a salt shaker and turned bright. Right after Elijah didn't interrupt. When she paused, he offered a tissue, not a plan, not a sermon, just presence. By the time the tea cooled, something inside her had shifted. Not romance, not resolution, but the beginning of a tenderness rooted in recognition. And for the first time, Nia no longer felt like a broken widow clinging to a memory. She felt like a woman still worthy of being known. The letter stayed tucked under her pillow for nights after that. She didn't need to read it again. She had memorized every word. But knowing it was there, close to her, gave her a kind of peace she hadn't felt in months. Then, one crisp morning, an envelope arrived, ivory, thick, embossed in gold. She already knew it wasn't good. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, neatly folded, was a court summons. Valerie and Anthony Whitmore were suing for custody of her son. Their argument was brutal. Nia was emotionally unstable, financially dependent, and unfit to provide a stable environment for a child. The words on the page hit her like blows. She sat at the kitchen table, frozen, her hands gripping the document so tightly they crinkled at the corners. Elijah read silently over her shoulder. His jaw clenched. He placed the papers gently on the table, then looked at her. "They're not taking your son," he said. Nia shook her head slowly, dazed. "They have lawyers, money. They'll say whatever they have to." "Then we'll show the truth," Elijah replied. "We won't just fight them. We'll tell your story." Over the next 2 weeks, Elijah transformed. He didn't raise his voice or act like a savior. He simply worked. With quiet intensity, he gathered everything. Photos of Nia bathing her son, singing to him in Spanish and English, rocking him through fevers, reading to him by soft light. Some moments she didn't even know he had captured. He printed each photo, added dates, times, notes, and small handwriting. Then he placed them all in a leather-bound album. On the cover, embossed in gold, was her son's name. "This isn't evidence," Elijah said one evening, setting it in front of her. "It's a story. His story. And yours." Nia flipped through it slowly, in awe. Her hands grazed each page, like it was sacred. "You made this?" He nodded. "You never saw yourself the way I did." Her throat closed. She had always felt invisible, until now. The hearing was scheduled for a rainy Thursday morning. Nia arrived at the courthouse with shaking hands and eyes full of steel. She wasn't fearless. But she was no longer alone. The courtroom felt colder than outside. White walls, glassy floors. Nothing to anchor her but the sound of her own breath. Nia sat stiffly at the front, her palms damp. Her son was with a trusted caregiver in the hallway. Her eyes scanned the room. Valerie and Anthony arrived in designer black. Perfect hair. Composed faces. They sat behind polished lawyers with folders thick with accusations. Everything about them said they had already won. When Nia's name was called, her throat tightened. She stood. The questions came sharp and fast. Her finances, her housing, her emotional stability. The lawyer's voice was calm but loaded with judgment. Nia tried to answer, but her voice wavered. She hated how weak it sounded. She hated the way the lawyer raised an eyebrow when she spoke Spanish. She hated that she had to explain herself to people who had never cared to know her. Her gaze flicked toward Elijah. Just once. He didn't speak, didn't nod. He simply reached under the table and placed his hand over hers. Firm, steady. It didn't solve everything, but it was enough. Then, it was Elijah's turn. He walked to the center of the room, carrying the leather-bound album like it was a sacred object. He placed it gently on the table before the judge. "This," he began, his voice low and unwavering, "is what motherhood looks like." He turned a page. A woman teaching her son the word for light. He turned another. A woman up all night, when he had a fever, holding him through it. Then another. A woman accused of being unfit, yet who has never asked for anything but the chance to love her child. He looked up not at the judge but at everyone. "I'm not standing here because Malcolm asked me to help her. I'm standing here because I've seen her, every single day. And I know without question that no man alive or gone would look at a woman like this and call her anything less than a mother." Silence. Even Valerie shifted in her seat. The judge flipped slowly through the album, her face unreadable. Then she closed it with care and said, "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." Outside, the courtroom, Nia finally exhaled. Her chest felt light, her eyes full. "You didn't have to do all of that," she whispered. Elijah looked at her, steady as always. "Yes," he said. "I did." And in that moment, something more than relief passed between them. Something deeper. Something starting to look a lot like trust. The knock came just as the city skyline turned golden behind the buildings. Nia had just put her son down to sleep. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your skin. She paused mid-step. Elijah looked up from the kitchen where he was drying his hands. "You don't have to open it," he said gently. "But if you do, whatever you feel, it's okay. I'll be here." Nia gave a small nod and walked to the door. On the other side stood Valerie Whitmore. She hadn't seen her since the custody hearing. Valerie's silver hair was pinned back as always, but her face had changed. Not just older, softer, tired. She didn't speak. She didn't apologize. Instead, she reached into her purse and slowly pulled out a folded cream-colored cloth with a faded blue border. Valerie held it in both hands and extended it forward. Nia's breath caught. She knew that cloth. She'd used it to wipe Malcolm's forehead in his final hours, had left it behind on the hospital chair when grief made her blind to everything else. Now it was here. Washed, folded, carried in the hands of the same woman who once tried to erase her. Valerie's voice came quiet, almost broken. He kept it under his pillow. That was all. No defense, no apology. Just that. Nia took it slowly, her hands trembling. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, He loved this." Valerie gave a soft nod, lips parting as if to say something more, but she didn't. She stepped back and turned away. Nia watched her walk off into the dusk, then closed the door behind her. She clutched the cloth to her chest and leaned against the wood. Her knees nearly gave out. She made her way down the hallway, slow and heavy. In the kitchen, Elijah sat quietly, reading. The soft glow from the overhead lamp made the space feel warmer than usual. On the table beside him sat a mug of tea and a clean hand towel folded neatly. He didn't say anything when he saw her tears. He just pushed the towel forward, stood halfway from his chair and offered it gently. "You don't have to be strong right now," he said. Nia took the towel and sat down beside him. She still held the cloth Valerie had returned. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because in that silence was something real, something that no longer belonged to Malcolm's memory, but to them. Not as widow and helper, just two people who had learned to stay, even when everything else had fallen away. The backyard was simple. Nothing grand, nothing showy. Just a modest patch of ground behind the apartment, framed by ivy-covered brick walls and an old wooden fence. But that night it glowed. Strings of warm lights hung above, swaying gently in the evening breeze. Tea candles flickered on small tables scattered with delicate plates of fruit, pastries, and fresh flowers. Nia stepped back to take it in. It wasn't a funeral. It wasn't even a memorial. It was her idea, a gathering. A moment to remember Malcolm without sorrow. No suits, no silence, no speeches, just stories, just warmth. She told Elijah, "No tears, only good memories." He had simply nodded and said, "Then we'll make it beautiful." And he did. She had watched him hang lights late into the night, wobbling on a ladder in his dress pants, muttering about how he hated heights. He arranged each seat with care, every plate, every napkin, exactly the way she described. When she looked tired, he poured her tea. When she hesitated, he didn't speak, just looked at her, calm and steady, like always. Now the guests were arriving, not family members, not lawyers, just people who knew Malcolm by heart, neighbors, co-workers, volunteers from shelters he'd supported, friends who hadn't been invited to the funeral because they weren't appropriate. There were no name tags, no microphone, just Nia greeting everyone with her son balanced on her hip, his small hand tugging gently at her shawl. Her smile was quiet but real. A woman shared how Malcolm had secretly paid for her daughter's medical treatment, leaving a blank envelope with the words, "Keep this between you and healing." An elderly man spoke of how Malcolm brought him warm meals every Thursday for 2 years and always stayed for a game of checkers. A teenager stood awkwardly and said, "Mr. Whitmore once told me, you're not your mistakes. You're the one who decides what comes next." I'm in college now because of that. Each story built a portrait of the man she loved, not as her husband, but as someone who quietly gave the best parts of himself to the world. It humbled her, and in a way she hadn't expected. It healed her. As night fell and the lights overhead grew brighter, the garden came alive. Laughter drifted into the air. Guitar music hummed softly from a weathered speaker in the corner. While refilling the tea station, Nia glanced across the garden. There, near the lavender bushes, stood Elijah, holding her son in his arms, bouncing him gently. The child giggled, tugging at Elijah's collar. Elijah laughed too, not loudly. Just enough. A soft, natural sound that wrapped around the moment like a blanket. Nia walked toward them slowly. The lights caught the edges of Elijah's dark curls, turning them gold. His smile curved gently, not for show, but from someplace honest. She stopped beside him and laid her hand on his shoulder. He looked at her, surprised, but then he nodded. No words were spoken, none were needed. There were no ghosts between them anymore. No shadows of grief. Just the present. The child in his arms, her hand resting on his shoulder, and the quiet beginning of something new. Time didn't stop for them. It didn't pause to announce what was happening between Nia and Elijah. It just moved forward, quietly, naturally. There was no big wedding, no ring photos, no social media posts declaring forever. But what they built was real. They called it Malcolm's Light, a foundation dedicated to helping single mothers and widows, the ones no one saw, the ones the world called unfit before ever knowing their story. It was Nia's idea. She became the face of the organization not just in name but in heart. She didn't welcome women with pity. She welcomed them with dignity. She created a space where broken didn't mean helpless, where survival wasn't shameful, and where every woman could start again. I know what it's like, she often said to newcomers, to lose everything and still be expected to be strong. But you don't have to do it alone. She didn't say it from theory. She said it from memory. Behind the scenes, Elijah handled everything else. Finances, legal matters, fundraising, logistics. He never asked for his name on anything. Never stood at the podium. He let the spotlight fall on her, where it belonged. Every now and then, people asked if they were together. Nia would smile and say, "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." Their home reflected the same quiet rhythm. Elijah brewed coffee every morning before she woke up. Nia packed his briefcase with an extra sandwich and always left a handwritten note tucked inside. Friday nights were for puzzles and storybooks with her son, who now called Elijah T. They didn't need titles. What they had was deeper than that. What they had was trust turned to routine, kindness turned to partnership, grief turned to grace, and it held. On the 3rd anniversary of Malcolm's Light, Nia stood by the tall glass window in the Foundation's main office. She watched women she had once comforted now stepping into new lives, laughing, walking out with job offers, keys to apartments, and a sense of worth that had once felt out of reach. The door creaked, gently. Elijah appeared calm as ever, one hand resting on the handle of a stroller. Inside it sat her son, almost 4 now, his cheeks still pink from his nap. "You ready for the walk?" Elijah asked. Nia nodded. She slipped on her shawl, joined them outside, and the 3 of them strolled into the golden warmth of late afternoon. The park across the street was painted in autumn colors, leaves swirling like blessings around their feet. Children laughed in the distance. A soft breeze tugged gently at the edges of her shawl. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Elijah pushed the stroller with one hand and pointed out birds with the other, naming each tree they passed, humming a soft tune. Nia glanced, over at him. His face was focused on her son, gentle, present. He had never tried to take Malcolm's place, but somehow, without pushing, he had created a new one of his own. She smiled. Then she looked ahead. No stage, no applause, no declarations of love. But what they had built, quietly, patiently, was something better than she had ever imagined. This wasn't the life she expected. It was better. And in that final image, Naya walking hand in hand with Elijah, her child safe and smiling in front of them, the world moving softly around them, there were no more ghosts. No need to explain how it happened or define what they had. There was only love. Simple. Unshakable. Enough.